Hey friends, Bethany Bravery here. Welcome back to another episode of the Bringing Her Hope podcast. I am just so excited to introduce you to my new friend, Marcia Nathai. Thanks so much for being on the show, Marcia.
Hi, Bethany. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here.
We are so glad that you are here. Why don't you share with my friends, our viewers, our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I am a special needs parent from Trinidad and Tobago, which is the last island in the chain of Caribbean islands. So I'm always warm here, and that's something that I think I was born for. I am a teacher at a university, and I'm an engineer. But what lights me up is helping people to connect to their soul's purpose and to live into a fuller life by fulfilling that purpose. And my own purpose has become clearer as I've had kids. I have two children. My son is 14, and he's sort of ahead of the curve. And then my daughter is 9, and she was brain injured at age 8 months. She's bedridden. And so we've had quite a journey learning how to cope as special needs parents. And we've done a lot of learning and a lot of courses to help us to learn about her condition, to adapt how we do interventions at home, and to just help us to believe that she does have a future that matters. Amen. And it doesn't matter how it compares to anybody else's, because she's living her best life.
I love that. So today, she kind of alluded to our topic. We're going to be talking about leaning into a hopeful future as a special needs parents. One thing that Marcia and I both share in common is we both are mamas of special needs kids, and it is a journey. And so I am so excited to lean into this conversation. I'm so excited to just gain wisdom from you. But you know, this story will apply in all sorts of areas, right? When we don't know exactly, we have this plan, we have this expectation in our head of what our life is going to look like. And then there's a change. How do we respond to that? So, Marcia, why don't you take us on your journey, friend?
Okay. So this part of the story is Emma's story. That's what I'll focus on for this video, for this podcast. The whole journey began back in 2012. I had been applying to be a university lecturer for 10 years at that point, had not gotten through. And all of a sudden, I found myself with this job that I had longed for. At the same time, I discovered that I was pregnant. And a couple months into my lecturing journey, Emma was born with 4 problems in her heart. It's a condition called tetralogy of Fallot. And here in Trinidad, we didn't have any competencies to do that surgery. So I was told that I had to wait until Emma had become so critical that open heart surgery would be mandatory, and then we'd be forced to go away to do surgery. So that happened at age 8 months. She suddenly turned blue. That's called getting cyanotic. Her body wasn't able to pump blood enough her heart wasn't able to pump blood enough around her body. And so she was short of oxygen. And her body started to starve for oxygen. I was told that if I didn't get her out of the country and into surgery, within about a week, she would start seizing and she could have a stroke. So we rushed and we went to the States for this open heart surgery, in a facility that had done thousands and thousands of these surgeries. We knew of many people who had done these surgeries successfully, and it was routine for American teams. Emmy's surgery went well, but while she was in the ICU, the time came to take her off the ventilator. And somehow in that procedure, that same night that she had done the surgery, together with taking the tube out, the doctor managed to pull the tube out of her heart and she bled out.
Oh my gosh.
Not something that anybody expects, totally way out of the doctor's experience as well. They were totally flabbergasted as to how it had happened. But when it happens, you can't undo it. It is what it is. And my husband and I, Sean and I, we sat on the floor outside of the ICU holding hands because we'd been put out when the whole crashing happened. Emma had flatlined. And for 20 minutes, Emma's heart refused to restart. They cracked her chest, they put their hands in her chest, and they tried to massage her heart. And for 20 minutes, her heart would not start. So the line was just flat, the alarms were all blaring. And then I held my husband's hand and we decided the only thing we had at that point was to pray.
Mm.
And so roughly the prayer was, Lord, in the past, all we've prayed for Emma is to accept your will. That's all we said. But forgive me, I can't say that right now.
Mm.
I knew I should have said that, but I couldn't say it. And so the prayer became, give me back my child.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, her heart started again. The words came out and immediately the trace began again. And Emma had come back. Sometimes we pray expecting things to go back to how they were.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. Emma came back, but Emma came back seizing. She was put on medication to suppress her nervous system, to suppress her brain, to keep it from seizing. The next morning, she was seizing again, so they doubled up the medication. And then Emma just lay there in a coma. They put her in a hypothermic state. They dropped her body temperature because they said if they put her in that hypothermic state, it would reduce chances of brain swelling and brain damage. And then they told us, we are waiting for her organs to shut down.
Mm.
And so we just waited. And 2 weeks passed, she remained in this comatose state, and her organs didn't fail. Not knowing what was going on with them, they finally did an MRI after 2 weeks. And what an MRI would show is usually your brain would show up in this scan as gray. But Emmy's brain showed up as white. And they came very solemnly to us and they said, well, we did the MRI and her organs didn't shut down. Her brain has. Her whole brain has been wiped. They basically told us that her brain cells had all died.
Mm.
And so they said she's lost all of her senses and she's lost her ability to suck and swallow. So they told this news to my husband when he was alone with Emma. I had taken my 5-year-old son downstairs to Dunkin' Donuts to buy him something to make him not feel so somber.
Yeah.
And that's the time when the news was dropped. So I came back up with Brian, my son, and I found Sean just crying.
Mm.
Because they had told him that Emma had been significantly or severely brain damaged. And he didn't know if we could ever find hope again.
Yeah.
So from there, it became, I think it was a game that I played with myself without knowing it.
Mm.
I had to pretend to have it all together for my husband, who I saw as broken, for my mother, who was there, but who would go around the corner and cry at the end of another walkway, for my son, whom I couldn't put the weight on.
Mm.
And so I made this whole big pretense of being happy and hopeful, of laughing and playing with him, of playing music, of massaging him and saying, Em, you're going to be fine. And I think what I was doing there is I was leaning into God.
Mm.
You know, the Footprints prayer,
Yeah.
or the Footprints poem. I didn't see it as that at the time, but I don't know what was holding me up When we don't know, I think it's God who's holding us up.
Amen.
And I was moved by intuition, which I equate to God, for how to put the next foot down every day. How do we keep moving forward? I didn't have the tools to do that.
Yeah.
So I was guided to go to Amazon. I was guided to do a search for brain injury. I bought a book. It was like a professional book on helping your special needs child. And it spoke specifically about brain injury. That was the theme. And my job was just to start studying. So I started to study. I started to play CDs of classical music, hoping that locked in herself, she could somehow hear this. But certainly what she could feel, because there's energy that goes with prayer and there's energy with positivity. She could feel that energy from the music, from the way we touched her, from the way we talked about her, you know. And our job was to convince ourselves, despite what anybody else said, that Emma had come back to us for a reason. That was a hard time. But now she turned 9 last month. She's brain injured and bedridden still. But where Emmy started was locked in a comatose state. And they told us that she would be vegetative for life.
Wow.
That she would be an adult unable to move. She was locked in this position. Her arms would be out and her feet would be down. Exactly like, you know, the cross?
Yes.
That's how she was. And now, Emmy has the ability to kick. Emmy has the ability to move her hands. When we feed her, we say, do you want another mouthful? If you do, raise your hand, and her little hand comes up. She's not verbal, past about 3 words. So she does say a few words. Dada is the one word that's very, very clear, because Dada is her boy. So people ask me, Marcia, don't you feel bad that your daughter doesn't say mama? No, once upon a time, my daughter could say nothing.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, tears would come down right after the open heart and she was starting to come out. You'd see tears and you would see her mouth opening and she was screaming and there was no sound. And I remember that every time.
Yeah.
Because now she has the ability to vocalize. She's starting to make sounds. I don't care that she's 9 and still sounding like an 8-month-old.
Yeah.
Because once upon a time, she wasn't supposed to even be here according to doctors.
Yes.
More than that, my child can say Dada. She can let everybody know who is her favorite person on the face of this earth. And she can express the music that she loves. She has playlists galore. And if I say, Alexa, play Sean and Emma playlist, she begins to kick because she knows what's coming.
Love it.
And that tells me that Emma has processing ability. She has the ability to understand.
Yes.
So she gets language input, language output, not so much, but way beyond what anybody expected. And she's only 9.
That is such a beautiful story, and man, that God has given you this platform to now be able to share your story with other special needs parents. I want to unpack some questions that just came to my heart and my mind. From the time of leaving the hospital, what did the day-to-day look like as you were navigating this new lifestyle? How were you processing it? What was God covering you in that way?
The first thing that happened for us is we were not sure when we got back home what therapy services might exist, what support we might have. And as God does, he lines up resources for us.
Yes.
And they come to us as though you randomly bump into them. But I don't think that's how it happened.
Yeah.
So there was this very heart-centered therapist. She was an occupational therapist who came to Emma's room in the ICU. And her name was Vanessa. And Vanessa said, would you like me to come and show you how to do some occupational therapy, a little massage for Em? Yeah. At that point, we knew that Em was going to feel pain when she was touched and that sort of thing. And Vanessa very, very gently began to tutor us. She would do therapy for Em, but she would go the extra mile of saying, come mom, come dad. Let me show you the kind of touch I'm using. Let me explain the effect on the nerves. Not everybody does this. That's not your job. But she became teacher as well as therapist. And she just spread love. She talked to us and I said to her, I don't know what's waiting for us when we go back home. Do you think you could get us into a rehab facility for a week? Could you help us to just learn from others? We're going to do like this intensive. We're going to put ourselves in a place where we soak up everything. And she found a way to get us in for a week. The rehab center said to us, we have never accepted children. We never do. But somebody advocated so hard for you all that you all are here. And every Friday when they were about to put us out, Emmy would do something that would show
hope. Man, go girl, I love it.
And they would say, well, we didn't expect Emmy's eyes to open, and her eyes have opened. We didn't expect to hear a little sound from Emmy, and we've heard a sound, that sort of thing. And so we stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks, being extended a week every time.
Wow.
And we got the blessing of getting exposure to more of Vanessa as the occupational therapist for those weeks. Having a physiotherapist that we were able to go in and not only observe, but his name was Mike, and he was willing to say, yes, mom, come. You lead it now, I'm going to show you how. And he taught us the methods. And we even had speech therapists, and the speech therapists showed us their methods and shared their heart as well. That was the magic that we started with. Then we had put a nasogastric tube in, a little tube through her nose down into her stomach. And Em would get 5 milliliters of my milk. A teaspoon of my milk a day was all that she was allowed, because they expected the organs to shut down. Thank God I had kept pumping. My milk hadn't disappeared. I had filled their freezer with my milk actually during the time. And that milk became the life-giving solution, because she would have rejected all else. And I felt like, okay, so why were you led to do these things? And the answer is, there was God putting things in place long before I knew anything was going to go wrong. So we kept feeding the 5 mLs. And when we got home, we started to look for therapists. And we started to see therapists who would cry when they saw Em. Because they'd never had, I think, a child so hurt surviving. And so they didn't know if they had the ability to help her. She would go to them and she would throw up all over everything. And they would be terrified. She would aspirate and all of that. And she never did anything for them because she fed off the energy. And the energy was, you'll never really learn how to do anything. I've given up before I've started. And so we would come home. It was an 1.5-hour drive to come home from the therapist. We would come home, and the minute the car came in front of our gate, Emmy would go, ah. And we started to realize that she might not be able to see or move, but Emmy knew what home felt like. We moved her upstairs to home, and Emmy would begin we'd do the same therapy that the therapist tried. And all of a sudden she'd do it for us.
Mm.
So we began to record those things. And when the therapist said, okay, well, I don't see any evidence that your child can do anything that you're saying, I'd show them the videos. And they'd say, oh, okay. Don't know how she's doing it for you because you're not a therapist. But that was us learning to stand in our power,
Yes.
to go from a place of hope,
Yes.
to continually try new things, experiment and learn. And it was okay to fail. I could try 10 things. If one worked, we were successful.
I love that. So good.
And I think that all of that was inspired by, God's energy just guiding us, because there was nothing else that could give me those answers.
Amen. I love that. In my own story with Gracie, there was a lot of things spoken over her from doctors and those kinds of things, like she wouldn't be able to walk, she wouldn't be able to ride a bike. And I remember, because I was a very young mom, I was 20 when I had her, and I remember having this kind of uncertainty of, Lord, how do I have this open-handed posture with you? Like, how do I go to the doctor appointments one after another and hear what they speak over her? And then how do I have this open-handed posture of, actually, I believe my God's bigger, kind of a thing. And so this dance was always it was a struggle for me, right? I didn't want to receive what they were saying, but I wanted to be able to use the resources, because those are a gift as well. But at the same time, I didn't want that to be spoken over her, and that was it forever and ever. Amen. And so I am so proud of you guys for kind of doing both, because it is hard as a special needs parent to go from doctor appointment to doctor appointment and feel like that is what it is. But at the same time, there are beautiful moments, there are divine appointments that God opens up situations, even if it's at the home in an unexpected way. It may not always just be during therapy. And so I think that's one thing that I want to encourage from my perspective as special needs moms or dads. You guys, there might be a diagnosis, but God is bigger than a diagnosis. And so, yes, having help and trust and those kinds of things in the resources that you've been given, but at the same time, having this open-handed posture of, Lord, you are bigger and you are greater, and your plans and your dreams for these kids are just as important as any other kid. Marcia, for you, another thing that we have in common is, so you have 2 children. You mentioned Brian. Is that your son's name, correct?
Yes.
What was that like for you to have a high-functioning child versus, a child that was dependent upon you? How did you do that, balance that?
Yeah. I come from a family where both my parents were teachers. My mother was a school principal, and they were very high standard teachers. So they always would, when I was little, they would wake us early and say on a Saturday morning half day was schoolwork, and then evening half day you could go play. Morning half day was when cartoons were on. That was the hardest thing to live through. But their priority was education, because to them, education was the way out of poverty into the better life, etc., etc. And it is what they had learned as children. Because my mother came from an indentured laborer background with a very, very poor family. And education has helped her to build a good life. So that was instilled in me. And so with Brian, we actually brought him up, always studying what the next developmental stage was, and always preening and saying, wow, he's ahead of this stage. I'm so proud of him, right? We may not have told other people, but we certainly were saying it to ourselves. I was so proud that Brian was going guns. He was reading at 2, etc., etc. That's crazy, right? No need for Brian to do those things, but that was the lane that I was in. And I still am proud of Brian because he works at his academic wellness. But the cool thing with Brian is he understands and values that he needs to do well, but he also understands balance.
Okay.
And so And I think he has learned a lot more of that because of what's happened with them. But he went ahead and he bought his first video game. It was on Steam, and I think it was Minecraft or something like that. And many years ago, and he created his account. When he had to name his account, he named it Leisure Maker. And I was like, what a name, because he was letting me know, back off, mommy, I'm going to have a time when there's no work, when there's just me enjoying myself. Emma has taught me a lot about that, because I cried. I've done a lot of crying in this time. I mean, so far it sounded as if I am this strong person and I've just powered through. But I've been broken a lot as well. And I've spent a lot of time crying. And one of the things I cried about was that my child would never be able to meet the developmental stages. She'd never be able to read. She'd never be able to go to school. She'd never be able to interact with others socially in the way that I thought life was going to be well lived. Yeah. And what the whole learning exercise was for me was throwing out my old mental models. Yeah. My child is not more worthy because of academic performance. She's not less worthy if she doesn't do that. Emma is the most inspirational person that I've ever known. And she also is the one person who lives most in joy and connection to who she is. And it does not take her speaking or being able to express herself to do that. I open my eyes every morning. Sean sleeps with her because she's so large now that I can't lift her. I lift her for seconds to get to the rocking chair, and I can't do much more than that. So he's the power person who lifts her, walks her, does everything. So I wake up in my bed and she's in the room next door. And as soon as my eyes open, I hear Emma laughing every morning. That has become a really big lesson for me, because I used to cry for what my child had lost. And I used to cry for what my child would never be able to do. And I used to cry because I felt guilt about possibly my genetics causing her problems. And then one day, it finally dawned on me that I was crying not because of Emma. I was crying because of what I thought I lost. I was crying for poor me. Yeah. And Emma, who is the actual person who lost it all, is laughing every day.
Wow.
Because that's her purpose, to live life fully, to spread a message. She came here, I'm sure, to share a message. And it's taken me 7 years to learn that message, I think. But I think I'm learning it more now.
That is, I feel like that's a common theme for parents of special needs. I have dealt with, I think sometimes I still wrestle sometimes with wanting to put Gracie in a box of the world's successes, and she's 17 and she'll be graduating next year. But I think, yeah, which is exciting. But I want to, like, if I could hold every special needs mom or dad's heart right now, I want to encourage you that God understands your tears. And you're right, like, we could be stuck in this victim mentality that, you know, it isn't what we thought it was going to look like. But at the same time, he grieves with us and he collects our tears. And like, that's how amazing he is. Because I've felt guilty a lot in her life of, man, why am like because she's very happy-go-lucky too. She has a lot of natural joy. And it's like, she's not missing out on anything. I'm the one that has this expectation that really isn't a definition of purpose anyways. It's not what God had in mind for her. And in fact, she's working towards a goal of becoming a special needs teacher because she now has this compassion and this heart for kids that have walked through what she's walked through. And it's crazy. It's like, of course, Lord, of course you're going to take something that is so hard and make beauty, right? I think another thing that I wanted to unpack, I'm a single mama, but I know this is something that can be a struggle. And so I want to speak to parents who are married. Talk to me about you and Sean and navigating, the finding out the news of being a special needs parent, and how do you pursue your marriage? How do you do that together? Because I know that can be a huge challenge.
The challenge for us was, given how deep Emma's needs have been, we had to keep 2 jobs to keep managing payments and so on, and make sure to be able to afford what she needed. And that meant that we had the full-time job of caring for Em, plus 2 full-time jobs. So we started to sort of take shifts around each other. And I shifted my work to evenings and nights. And Shawnee stayed, he's a teacher, so he stayed with his teaching hours. When he drove in at 3 in the afternoon, I would jump into the bathroom, I would change, and I would run out and jump into the car, and I would go to the university, teach, do office hours, sometimes do 1 3-hour class back to back with another, because I was trying to get it all in order to give me more time to take Emmy to therapy, to do whatever visits, etc., etc. And so for many years in there, we didn't really see much of each other except to have transactional conversations. What was Emmy's state? What did Brian need? Is there a parent-teacher meeting? How are we going to navigate the schedule? And so it became that we lived for our children, that we just were the gears that kept it working. That's what we became. And that's how we needed to survive for a while there. Interestingly, straight up to the year that Em got sick, Sean and I, the year that Em was born, Sean and I had talked about divorce. We had times when we butted heads, times when we had different opinions. We have 2 very different styles. He's a quiet, very generous, self-sacrificing guy. I'm a loud-mouthed, logical kind of person, right? Almost as if we have exchanged roles, because he's more the nurturer and I'm more the planner and the thinker and the let's go out there and let's fly to Philadelphia and do a course, that sort of thing, right? And that could be really hard, especially in a culture where traditional values are held and you are sort of flipping it. You have judgments from outside that also come home to cause, to cause some concern. Emmy got sick and Emmy got hurt, and all of a sudden, I look back years later and I realized we never spoke of that again. Because all of a sudden we shared one thing. We realized that the love of our life was our family. That I loved Sean with a kind of intensity that I had not recognized. That I loved Emma and Brian in such a deep, deep, integral way. But until we were tested and until we were just at the point of breaking, we didn't realize how blessed we were to have each other. So Shawnee asked me just about 6 months ago, after I wrote this book, I had a chat and I was telling him about a piece of the book. And I said, Sean, if you had the chance to go back and do this again, if we could avoid Emmy being born, being hurt, and all the other things, would you choose it? And we both had the same response: no way, because life is so much better with Em in it. Our family would never be whole without all 4 of us. and it feels as if it is the right family, the right ordained family. So how is it that I could be so heartbroken and hurt, but also happier than I've ever been in my life? I don't understand it, but it is true. Serious, serious happiness came, not because of it, but because of the recognition of how much I value these souls.
Man, that is just God's amazing power of redemption, to take a hard situation and turn it into something incredible that you wouldn't even expect. I mean, it's who would have thought, as statistics would say, a lot of marriages fail due to a special needs child, and God was like, oh no, I'm going to flip the script in this storyline, and I'm going to show them the beauty in that. I love it, girl. I love that. Okay, let's speak to a special needs parent. Your book, Lighting the Path, Leaning into a Hopeful Future as a Special Needs Parent. Who did you write that for?
I think I wrote it for me.
Mm.
And I also wrote it for everybody like me. Yeah. The need for the book was found when Em got hurt, and I couldn't find a book where somebody would hold my hand, where somebody would tell me, okay, these are the things you're going to come up against, the feelings you're going to come up against, the judgments other people will put on you, the fears you're going to have about the future, the doubts about if you're doing things right, the advice on what to do now. I didn't know where 90% of that was coming from. And so we kind of muddled through. And I would sit, I write in order to know what I feel. Mm. And so I would sit on my computer and I would write whole chapters on how I felt about the isolation or the incident that was going on, the pain Emmy was going through, etc. And then I just had these chapters, and I thought, maybe one day I'll write a book and these chapters will get adjusted, will get a little zhuzh, and I can put them together and the book will be there. But I didn't have the confidence that I was the right person. I didn't feel like I was qualified to be the person writing this stuff. Somebody else was better. But last year I started to get some very clear, I would pray and I would meditate, and I would get these messages telling me that I needed to write the book. I had not treasured the chapters I had written. I had misplaced them. I didn't know where they were. And then in September, I opened my eyes one morning and the message came, today you begin the book. Mm. And for some reason, I listened for the first time. I had done an interview with a book coach a month before, because I was trying to inspire my students who were becoming apathetic in COVID times. And I wanted to show them that people, just wherever they are, by stepping into their purpose, can make a difference in their communities. And so I had seen this book coach and I decided to interview her. And we made a friendship. And so I reached out to her and I said, do you have any tips for if you want to write a book? Lo and behold, she became my book coach. Mm. And every week I wrote one chapter. And by the end of the year, the book was written. And next thing I heard, the book coach said, actually, I'd like to publish your book, please. Wow. I didn't shop it around. I didn't have the confidence that it was worthy. But she had been reading it and she said, this is a book I want to publish. Mm. And I think that was, again, God lining things up. What was her name? The name of her business was Burning Soul Publishers. And what was my big purpose? To help people to align their soul's purpose. So it started to feel like, okay, this seems to be aligning. So I felt so thrilled that this book was written, because this book came from the path I had walked. It came from all the pain that we'd had. And so the book starts with all of the doubt and the fear and the anger and the judgment. It covers things like guilt, and it covers guilt that people take and hand you. I had an aunt who told me it was my fault I got brain injured, for example. And at that point, that broke me. Now I look back and I'm like, so how in heaven's name does somebody think that adds value? Yeah. You know? Who needs additional crap being loaded on when they're living that life? And then you realize that judgments really are reflections of the person giving them as opposed to the person that they're being given to. And you're able to say, okay, let's just move on. So I've always stayed in that memory of how alone I felt and how broken I felt and how broken I saw Sean to be. And there were some effects on Bri. Bri became a child who came home with Emma brain injured and began to get 100 out of 100 in every single test. His report book came with 100% overall. And we were like, wow, right? Not realizing that Bri, we found this out years later, he kept working himself to the bone because he told the therapist, he ended up having a little breakdown at a point where he began to get violent to me. He felt frustrated to the point Emmy would scream and she would bleed and nothing he did could calm her. And we didn't know what he was feeling because he thought that we were living such hard lives that he had to manage himself. And when it finally broke, after he took about 2 years of that pressure, we took him to talk to somebody. And he told her he was sharing with her only on the condition that she would not tell us. He said, Mom and Dad are always under pressure, and my job is to make sure I don't add any pressure. That was a 5-year-old boy who made that decision. And when I heard that, I cried because no 5-year-old should have to live like that. And so we've started also learning how to manage our other children, our other child better, giving him time just for him, showing him that he's not the add-on to the family, that he's just as important as his sister. Yes, Emma is so needy that she takes 90% of our time sometimes, but there are ways that we've learned to incorporate Brian. He started to sneak into the room when we left and do therapy on her. But we didn't know because he didn't think we would trust him. We found that out from our therapist who tried to teach him. And he gave them a lecture on why physiologically he had to use this massage. So they said, listen, we don't have to teach your son anything. He's been sneaking and doing it. But that was, again, reflective of us treating Bri as if he wasn't a part of the solution for his sister. And so we learned to be inclusive. We learned to respect that he felt connected heart, mind, soul, and body to this sister. And as a family now, we've become more of a unit. We've learned to focus on how Brian feels loved. He feels loved when we give him time. And time is the thing we don't have. So before we had lockdown kind of conditions, we would actually schedule time to take him to a movie, mom and him only. Nothing else gets in the way. Yeah. A little game night with mom and dad. When we get Emmy down to sleep, we have enough time before she wakes up to play a game. Making his favorite dish, scheduling time to do something together. And recently we've found the most wonderful caregiver. We've gone through many, we've had many upsetting experiences. But this caregiver, her name is Melissa, is amazing. And she has brought us to the point where we can trust to say, okay, it's somebody's birthday, let's go out. Wow. In the beginning, the whole date was spent saying, I wonder what Emmy's doing. I wonder if Auntie is going okay, etc. But now we know all is well. And now I can take Bri and mom, dad, and Bri can go out. you know. So we've learned so much. And those lessons, the sharing of the stories of my imperfection, those come into the book too, because I think it's important to show that I've been far from perfect, and that's okay. What comes out of that is that we learn, you know, and that you are gentle with yourself, because nobody expects you to be perfect. I think we are harshest on ourselves. So the book was written to share our lived experiences. It was written to share our lessons learned. It was written to walk chapter by chapter through the main themes of what you might experience when, you know, the world falls away and you're there falling through and not sure who's going to hold you or if you're going to crash and burn. It's just to say, okay, so you are going to experience self-doubt. You're going to experience isolation. You're going to experience fear. You're going to experience such black anger. But then past that, you're also going to experience extreme joy and gratitude and fulfillment of a kind that this journey, I feel, brings different from any other journey. And I also want to remind you of little tips on how to help your other children to also thrive. Tips on how to step into or rebuild your relationship with your special other. And then not to forget yourself. Because once upon a time, before I got hurt, I had dreams.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, I felt that life had forced me to crumple those dreams up and toss them in the bin. And a big part of me died. And it's taken me close to a decade to realize that my child deserves more of me than just a shadow of who I am. I deserve more of me than just to be a piece. And so there's an actual whole chapter that talks about, let's help you to reconnect with your vision for yourself. And let's help you to align what kind of path you want to walk so that you have a fuller life and you find yourself more fully.
So good. You guys have to get this book. I want to end on one question and then we're going to tell you about some really exciting news. Marcia, if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with the special needs parents that are listening today, and maybe they're asking the question, you know, the Bible says, Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the purpose and the plan that I have for you, declares the Lord. And they're like, we know this scripture, we know there's purpose, we know there's a plan, but today, in the middle of doctor appointments, in the middle of looking at what isn't being met as far as developmental needs, what is one piece of advice or one like hug type of comfort that you would say to them?
There are two things that I have leaned into. One is when I was little, I learned a song in Sunday school about God sees the little sparrow fall. I know he loves me too. And the message in that song was, if God provides all for this little bird, surely he will provide for me. Surely I'm held in the palm of his hand and I am treasured. And the fact is that we worry so much more. And worry doesn't change anything. After we finish our worry session, the situation remains the same.
Yep.
So we actually talk, you know, about the power of affirmation and the power of gratitude and seeing how many blessings are around us. Doesn't take away the hardship of your life. I in no way want to do that, right? Because that's a big part of what we face. But just knowing that God has provided for us to get this far, has helped our children to get this far, despite all of the statistics that the doctors have spouted for us, despite all that they have said will never be done. so many positive things have happened, and they have happened because God has guided us. Mm-hmm. And the second one is, I never, never, never discount that a miracle can happen.
Oh, so good. I love it. So good.
I have seen, miracles don't have to be big.
Good.
Emma was supposed to be, as somebody said to me, she was supposed to be a log in a bed for the rest of her life. And my child laughs, she sings, she kicks, she understands, and she does so much more, because Emma's legacy is this book. It's not my legacy, it's hers. This is what she came here for. Part of what she came here for. And that doesn't mean that I don't reach the point where I just cry. Some nights I go to sleep and I cry. And I can't stop crying. And then I will just pray, because I don't know what else to do when I hit rock bottom. And the prayer is, Lord, I know you have so much power, and you have the power to change things in a split second. So let me go to sleep, Lord, and in the morning, let me wake up and Emmy's walking.
I love it.
Because I honestly believe it can happen. Yeah. And it might be way out there, but I have seen miracle after miracle through Em. And I believe that more are on the way. For me, for Em, for you, for your children.
So beautiful, so beautiful. Marcia, where can we buy your book? Because all of us want to read it. So where can we get it?
The book is available on Amazon. So you can get both hardcover, softcover, and e-copies of the book on Amazon. And if you want copies to be carried in your bookstores near you, feel free to tell them the ISBN number of the book that you'll get on Amazon, and tell them, please bring copies to the shelf. That will help me to get the message out there as well.
Love it. We will do that for you. And I know people are going to want to connect with you also. So how can they do that?
So if you want to get in contact with us, if you want a free chapter of the book, if you want to get a little preview before you buy, there's the peek inside with the Amazon. But you can also go to my website, which is Marcia, MARCIA, NB, which is short for my very long name, .com. MarciaNB.com. And there I have a newsletter, and I share lots of resources for special needs parents, and also for everybody else who might be facing adversity and overcoming overwhelm, because that's part of our journeys, right? And there are, Facebook group. There's a Facebook group where we can build community as special needs parents, and lots of other resources like podcasts and talks, etc., on the website.
Perfect. And if you guys are driving and you're just listening to the audio version of this, we've got you covered. All the links will be in the show notes. Okay, it's time for some exciting news. We have a book giveaway. I mean, we can't just have you on here and not say, please, could we share your book? So you can enter to win at bringingherhope.com, and we will make sure and connect with you if you are one of the winners. Marcia, friend, I am so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for our new friendship. I'm so grateful for your transparency and your vulnerability. Thank you so much for being a light and allowing God to continue to write your story and being willing to use in whatever way that He calls you to. I am so proud of you.
Thank you so much, Bethany. It has been such a joy to be a part of this whole journey with you. Thanks for helping me to get my message out, and thanks for sharing your message too. Best wishes to your 17-year-old daughter as well. Gracie, you said her name is? I always get so excited to hear about children who have gone through all of these things, but now are ready to go off and be independent. That's amazing.